The elevator in Marcus Blackstone's penthouse moved with the kind of silence that only money could buy. 73 floors above Manhattan, where the noise of the city became nothing more than a distant hum, where problems were solved with phone calls and contracts, not creativity, where the impossible stayed impossible, filed away in boardrooms and buried under legal documents marked unfeasible. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. But sometimes the impossible has small hands, bright eyes, and a way of seeing things that billion-dollar consulting firms missed entirely. Sometimes it arrives with peanut butter sandwiches and colored pencils, tucked into a corner of a kitchen, while their mother prepares soup that costs more per bowl than most people's weekly groceries. Marcus Blackstone owned 3 Fortune 500 companies, held patents on 17 breakthrough technologies, and had been called the most innovative mind in quantum computing by Forbes magazine 3 years running. What he didn't own, what he couldn't patent, what no magazine would ever give him credit for, was knowing when to listen to someone half his height who saw the world differently than his MIT-trained engineers. The morning it started, Marcus descended those 73 floors with the weight of a problem that had stumped his team for 18 months. A thermal dynamic equation that could revolutionize energy storage but remained mathematically unsolvable. His head of research, Dr. Angela Voss, had called it impossible just the night before. Not difficult, not challenging, impossible. By evening he would discover just how wrong they had all been. And it would come from the last place any of them thought to look, the kitchen where Elena Martinez stirred soup with one hand while helping her twins with homework with the other, never suspecting that tonight her children would rewrite the rules of what mathematical genius could look like. Elena Martinez had been invisible for so long that she'd forgotten what it felt like to be seen. She moved through the gleaming marble corridors of Blackstone Tower like a shadow with purpose, carrying trays, wiping surfaces, preparing meals that cost more than her monthly rent. Her key card granted access to the 68th floor and above, but only during business hours, only in service. She wasn't meant to linger, wasn't meant to notice the massive glass conference room where billion-dollar decisions were made over artisanal coffee and imported pastries. She wasn't meant to have opinions about the frustrated voices that echoed from that room at 7 p.m. on a Thursday evening when she brought in the dinner tray. "It's a complete dead end," Dr. Angela Voss was saying, her voice sharp with exhaustion. "We've run every simulation, tried every approach. The thermal coefficients simply don't align with the quantum properties needed for sustained energy storage. It's mathematically impossible." Marcus Blackstone sat at the head of the table, his silver hair catching the light from the floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Central Park. At 55, he still commanded every room he entered. But tonight, his shoulders carried the weight of a project that threatened to be his first major failure in a decade. "Impossible," he repeated slowly, as if tasting the word. "I've built my entire career on proving that word meaningless." "Not this time," Dr. Voss replied. Her team of 6 engineers nodded in agreement, their laptops open to endless streams of calculations that led nowhere. "We need to recommend shutting down Project Prometheus. The board won't fund another quarter of research on something that can't be solved." Elena set the tray down quietly, careful not to let the china clink. She'd heard this same conversation 3 times this week, each time growing more heated. These were the smartest people she knew, PhDs from Harvard and Stanford, researchers, who'd published papers in journals she couldn't pronounce. If they said it was impossible, who was she to think otherwise? She was nobody, really. A 40-year-old divorced woman from Queens who cleaned offices and cooked meals to pay for a tiny apartment she shared with her 8-year-old twins. She spoke English with an accent that got thicker when she was nervous, held a GED instead of advanced degrees, and knew more about getting red wine stains out of Persian rugs than she did about quantum physics. But Elena Martinez understood one thing these brilliant minds didn't. Sometimes the most complex problems had the simplest observers. The variables keep cancelling each other out, continued Dr. James Liu, the youngest member of the team at 28. Every time we solve for thermal efficiency, the quantum state collapses. Every time we stabilize the quantum field, the thermal dynamics fail. Elena paused in arranging the soup bowls. She'd heard that phrase before, variables cancelling each other out. Not from these engineers, but from her children last night. As they struggled with their second-grade math homework, Sophia had been trying to add and subtract numbers in the same problem, getting frustrated when they didn't work together. Miguel had suggested drawing the problem instead of just writing numbers. Maybe, Sophia had said, the numbers don't want to fight, maybe they want to dance. It was the kind of thing only an 8-year-old would say, the kind of insight that got lost somewhere between childhood curiosity and adult certainty. Elena smiled at the memory and continued her work, not noticing that Marcus Blackstone had glanced up at exactly that moment, catching the slight curve of her lips in a room full of frowns. We'll need to prepare the presentation for the board. Dr. Voss continued. Recommend transitioning resources to the renewable battery project instead. Give it one more week, Marcus said finally. If we're going to admit defeat, I want to be absolutely certain we've explored every angle. Doctor. Voss sighed but nodded. Elena finished arranging the dinner service and moved toward the door, pausing only when Marcus spoke again. Thank you, Elena. The soup smells wonderful. She turned, surprised. In 3 years of working in this building, he'd never spoken directly to her beyond basic pleasantries. Thank you, Mr. Blackstone. I hope you enjoy your dinner. Actually, he said, and something in his voice made the entire room look up. You've been here for most of these discussions. Have you ever studied mathematics? The question hung in the air like an unwelcome guest. Elena felt heat rise to her cheeks as 7 pairs of highly educated eyes turned toward her. No, sir, I finished high school, that's all. But you listen well, Marcus observed. Sometimes fresh perspective matters more than formal training. Dr. Voss cleared her throat. Marcus, I think, Marcus interrupted gently, that we've been staring at this problem so long, we might be missing something obvious. He turned back to Elena. What do you think when you hear us talking about variables that cancel each other out? Elena's mouth went dry. This was not a conversation she was meant to be part of. I don't really understand the technical parts, sir. Forget the technical parts. What does it sound like to you? She gripped the edge of the tray tighter. It sounds like when my children fight over a toy instead of playing together. A few of the engineers exchanged glances. Dr. Voss rubbed her temples, but Marcus leaned forward slightly. Go on. Sometimes they get so focused on pulling the toy away from each other that they break it. But when they work together, they can build things I never thought possible. Elena paused, realizing how silly she must sound. I'm sorry, I should go. No, Marcus said firmly. Don't apologize. That's actually remarkably insightful. Dr. Liu looked up from his laptop. Sir, with respect, this is a complex quantum engineering problem, not child psychology. Marcus didn't take his eyes off Elena. Where are your children tonight? Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. At home, they do homework in the kitchen while I prepare dinner for them. What kind of homework? Elena shifted uncomfortably. Mathematics, usually. Addition, subtraction, some word problems. And they work together? She nodded. Miguel is better with numbers, Sophia is better with pictures. They help each other. Marcus stood up slowly, his mind clearly working through something the rest of them couldn't see. Elena, I'd like to ask you an unusual favor. Yes, sir. Tomorrow is Saturday. Would you be willing to bring your children here for a few hours? I'd like them to see something. The room fell silent. Dr. Voss looked like she'd been slapped. Dr. Liu's mouth hung open slightly. Elena felt her world tilt sideways. Sir, I don't understand. My children, here? I have a theory, Marcus said, his voice gaining the kind of excitement that had built his empire. Sometimes the most complex problems require the most innocent approach. Dr. Voss found her voice. Marcus, you can't be serious. They're 8 years old. Exactly my point. He turned back to Eleanor. You don't have to agree, but I'll make it worth your time. A bonus, naturally, and I'll provide lunch for all of us. Eleanor stared at him, trying to understand what was happening. 3 years of invisible service, and now the most powerful man she knew was asking her to bring her children to his workspace. Her children, whose greatest mathematical achievement was mastering their times tables. I'll need to ask them, she said finally. Of course. Take your time. Marcus smiled, the first genuine smile she'd seen from him in months. But Elena, I have a feeling your children might surprise us all. That night, Elena sat at her small kitchen table while Miguel and Sophia worked on their homework. Their apartment was everything Blackstone Tower wasn't: cramped, lived in, filled with the comfortable chaos of childhood. Crayon drawings covered the refrigerator. Homework papers spread across every surface. The air smelled like the simple chicken stew she'd made from ingredients that cost her $8 total. Mummy, Sophia said, looking up from her worksheet. This problem doesn't make sense. Eleanor glanced over. It was a word problem about sharing apples between children, with addition and subtraction in the same equation. What's confusing you, Mija? It says take away some apples, then add some apples, then take away more. But that's silly. Why don't they just share all the apples at once? Miguel nodded, his pencil eraser chewed beyond recognition. Yeah, and why can't we just draw the apples instead of just using numbers? Numbers are boring. Elena smiled, remembering the frustrated voices from the conference room. Sometimes grown-ups make things more complicated than they need to be. Like when you and Papa used to fight about money? Sophia asked innocently. Elena's chest tightened. Her divorce had been final for 6 months, the result of too many arguments about too little money, too much pride, and too little communication. Something like that. If we had talked about what we both wanted instead of what we couldn't have, maybe we wouldn't have fought so much, Miguel said, his 8-year-old wisdom cutting straight to the heart of things his parents had been too stubborn to see. Elena stared at her son, then at her daughter, then at the homework scattered between them. An idea began forming in her mind, fragile and impossible, like soap bubble iridescent with possibility. Miguel, Sophia, she said slowly, how would you like to visit Mommy's work tomorrow? 2 pairs of dark eyes lit up. The tall building with the clouds? Sophia asked. Yes, that one. Can we see how high up you go? Miguel wanted to know. Even higher than that, Elena said, her heart beating faster. There's a man there who wants to meet you. He has a problem that some very smart people can't solve. What kind of problem? Sophia leaned forward. Elena thought about thermal dynamics and quantum fields, about variables cancelling each other out and equations that led nowhere. The kind that might need fresh eyes to see it differently. Miguel grinned. We're good at seeing things differently. Sophia nodded enthusiastically. Remember when we helped Mrs. Chen with her garden? All the grown-ups wanted to plant in straight lines, but we drew it like a spiral, and now the plants grow better. And when we reorganized Abuela's closet, Miguel added, "We didn't just sort by size or color, we sorted by what belonged together." Elena felt something shift inside her chest, a flutter of possibility she hadn't felt in years. Maybe Marcus Blackstone was right. Maybe sometimes the most complex problems required the most innocent approach. Maybe tomorrow would be the day her children taught a billionaire how to see. The subway ride to Manhattan that Saturday morning felt different than Elena's usual commute. Instead of traveling alone with a book and tired eyes, she sat between Miguel and Sophia, watching their faces pressed against the windows as the underground tunnels gave way to daylight and the city skyline grew larger. Both children wore their best clothes, Miguel in khakis and a button-down shirt that was slightly too big, Sophia in a navy dress with a small stain near the hem that Eleanor had tried unsuccessfully to remove. Their hair was combed neatly, their faces scrubbed clean, their excitement barely contained. "Is it scary being so high up?" Sophia asked as they emerged from the subway station, and Blackstone Tower loomed above them. "A little," Elena admitted, "but you get used to it." Miguel counted floors until he lost track somewhere around 20. "How many people work in there?" "Thousands," Elena said, guiding them toward the main entrance. "But we're going somewhere special today." The lobby security guard, Frank, looked surprised to see Elena with children on a Saturday. "Morning, Mrs. Martinez. Weekend work?" "Mr. Blackstone requested a meeting," she said, the words feeling strange on her tongue. Frank's eyebrows rose, but he printed visitor badges for the twins without question. Elevator bank 3 for the express to 68. And as they rode upward, Elena felt her stomach flip with more than just the acceleration. What was she doing? What if this was all some strange misunderstanding? What if Marcus Blackstone had changed his mind? What if her children embarrassed themselves, or worse, embarrassed her? "Mummy," Sophia said softly, taking her hand. "You're nervous." Elena squeezed her daughter's fingers. "A little." "When I'm nervous," Miguel said, "I pretend I'm an explorer, discovering something new." Sophia nodded. "And I pretend I'm helping. Someone who really needs help." Elena looked at her children and felt her anxiety settle into something more manageable. Whatever happened today, she was proud of these two small humans who saw the world with such clarity and kindness. The elevator doors opened onto the 68th floor, and Elena led them down the familiar corridor toward the conference room. Through the glass walls, she could see Marcus Blackstone alone at the table, papers spread before him. No team of engineers in sight. He looked up as they approached, and his face broke into a smile that seemed genuinely delighted. "Elena, thank you for coming, and these must be Miguel and Sophia." Both children nodded politely, years of Elena's careful instruction in manners serving them well. "Good morning, Mr. Blackstone," they said in unison. "Please call me Marcus." He gestured to chairs around the table. "I have juice boxes and sandwiches if you're hungry." "We ate on the way," Elena said, settling into a chair with a child on either side. Marcus sat across from them, his usual commanding presence somehow gentler in the presence of children. "I've been thinking about what your mother said yesterday, about how sometimes variables that fight with each other need to work together instead." Miguel tilted his head. "Like in our math homework?" "Exactly like that." Marcus pulled out a tablet and showed them a screen full of numbers and symbols. "This is a problem I've been working on. These numbers here," he pointed, "keep cancelling each other out." And Sophia studied the screen with the intensity she usually reserved for picture books. "They look angry." Marcus blinked. "Angry?" "Yeah," Miguel agreed. "Like they're pushing against each other instead of holding hands." Elena felt heat rise to her face. This was exactly what she'd been afraid of, her children saying something that would make them all look foolish. But Marcus didn't look amused or condescending. He looked fascinated. Tell me more about that, he said. Sophia pointed at two sets of equations. These ones here want to go up, and these ones want to go down. If they keep fighting, nobody gets anywhere. But what if, Miguel said, his voice gaining confidence, instead of trying to make them stop fighting, you let them fight in the same direction? Marcus stared at the screen, then at Miguel. What do you mean? Miguel slid out of his chair and walked to the whiteboard mounted on the wall. Can I draw? Of course. Elena watched her son pick up a marker and start drawing circles and arrows, his tongue poking out slightly in concentration. See, if you have two people pulling a rope in different directions, the rope doesn't move. But if they both pull the same way, they can move anything. Sophia joined him at the board. And if you make the circles dance together instead of apart, they make prettier patterns. She drew a series of interconnected spirals that somehow looked both mathematical and artistic. Elena had seen her daughter draw similar patterns at home, but never thought of them as anything more than doodles. Marcus stood up slowly and walked to the whiteboard. For a long moment, he stared at the children's drawings in silence. Then he pulled out his phone and made a call. Angela? It's Marcus. I need you in conference room A immediately. And bring your tablet. Eleanor felt panic creep into her throat. Mr. Blackstone, I think maybe we should... No, he said firmly but not unkindly. Please trust me. 10 minutes later, Dr. Angela Voss arrived, looking confused and slightly irritated. Marcus, it's Saturday. What's so urgent that... She stopped when she saw the children at the whiteboard. Angela, meet Miguel and Sofia Martinez, Elena's children. Dr. Voss blinked slowly. The children you wanted to show the project to? Actually, Marcus said, I want you to look at what they've drawn. Dr. Voss approached the whiteboard with the expression of someone humoring a delusional boss. But as she studied the circles and spirals, her expression changed. These drawings. What do you see? Marcus asked. The flow patterns, she said slowly. The way the spirals connect. Marcus, this looks like a possible solution to the harmonic resonance problem. Miguel looked up at her. Is that good? It might be very good. Dr. Voss pulled up the tablet with their equations. What if, instead of trying to eliminate the opposing thermal coefficients, we use them to create a feedback loop? Marcus moved to the board, studying the children's drawings with new eyes. A symbiotic relationship instead of a competitive one. Like dancing, Sophia said helpfully. Dr. Voss stared at the 8-year-old. Yes, exactly like dancing. For the next hour, Elena watched in amazement as her children's simple drawings became the foundation for a complex mathematical discussion. Miguel and Sophia, initially shy around Dr. Voss, became increasingly animated as they explained their thinking. They used words like friends and helping and sharing space to describe concepts that the engineers called harmonic integration and resonance stabilization. Your children, Dr. Voss said to Elena at one point, they see patterns in ways we never considered. Elena felt tears prick her eyes. They've always been good at explaining things to each other. Mummy, Sophia called from the whiteboard, where she was adding more drawings at Dr. Voss's request. Can we come back next week? This is fun. Marcus laughed, a sound Eleanor had never heard from him before. I think we can arrange that. By the time they left the building, the afternoon sun was setting behind the Manhattan skyline. Miguel and Sophia chatted excitedly about helping the nice math lady and making the angry numbers be friends. Elena walked between them, her head spinning with what had just occurred. Her children, her 8-year-old children who struggled with their times tables, had just provided insight that might solve a problem that had stumped some of the brightest minds in quantum physics. As they descended into the subway station, Elena's phone buzzed with a text from Marcus. "Project Prometheus back on track. Your children may have just changed everything. Thank you." That night, as Elena tucked Miguel and Sofia into their beds, she thought about the day with wonder that felt almost too large for her small apartment. "Mummy," Sofia said sleepily, "why did the smart lady seem so surprised that we could help?" Eleanor smoothed her daughter's hair. Sometimes grown-ups forget that good ideas can come from anywhere. Even from kids? Especially from kids. Miguel yawned. "Can we really go back and help more?" "I think so," Eleanor said, and for the first time in years, she felt like anything was possible. As she turned off the lights and settled into her own bed, Elena stared at the ceiling and thought about variables that cancelled each other out, about circles that danced instead of fought, about the way her children saw the world, not as it was supposed to be, but as it could be. Tomorrow, she would return to Blackstone Tower not just as a cook and cleaner, but as the mother of 2 children who had reminded some very smart people that the simplest perspective could unlock the most complex problems. The impossible, as it turned out, had been possible all along. It just needed small hands and innocent eyes to show the way. Monday morning arrived with a crispness that promised change. Elena stood in the kitchen of Blackstone Tower at precisely 5:45 a.m., as she had for the past 3 years. But everything felt different. The familiar routine of checking inventory, reviewing the day's menu, and preparing the executive floor's coffee service now carried an undercurrent of possibility that made her hands shake slightly as she measured Colombian beans into the industrial grinder. Word had spread through the building like electricity through copper wire. Dr. Voss had spent her weekend running calculations based on the twins' drawings, and by Sunday evening, she'd called half her team back to the office. Security footage from Saturday's impromptu meeting had somehow found its way to other department heads, though Elena couldn't imagine who would have access to such recordings or why they'd care. But they did care. By 7 a.m., Eleanor had served breakfast to 3 separate groups of engineers and researchers who had found reasons to visit the executive floor. Their conversations peppered with phrases like paradigm shift and unconventional methodology and those children from the weekend. Marcus arrived at his usual time of 7:30, but instead of heading straight to his office, he paused by the kitchen service window. "Elena, good morning. How are Miguel and Sofia today?" "They're at school, sir. Normal Monday morning." She set his espresso down with hands that betrayed nothing of her internal turbulence. "I've been thinking about Saturday," he said, stirring honey into his cup, "about what Dr. Voss discovered after you left." Elena's pulse quickened. "Yes, sir?" "She ran the equations all weekend, the thermal harmonics model your children suggested. It works, Elena. Not just in theory, it actually works." The words hung between them like a bridge Elena wasn't sure she was ready to cross. "I don't understand what that means, Mr. Blackstone." "It means," he said, leaning against the counter in a way that would have scandalized his corporate board, "that your 8-year-olds solved a problem that's plagued energy research for 2 decades. And they did it in about 15 minutes. With colored markers." Elena felt the floor shift beneath her feet. "But they were just drawing. They didn't understand what you were asking." "That's exactly why it worked." Marcus's eyes held an intensity she'd never seen directed at her before. They weren't constrained by conventional thinking. They saw patterns where we saw obstacles. Dr. Voss appeared in the doorway, tablet in hand, looking like she hadn't slept in days. "Marcus, I need to show you the overnight simulations, and Elena, I'd like to speak with you if you have a moment." Elena glanced between them, feeling like a chess piece being moved by players whose game she didn't comprehend. "Dr. Voss, I'm not sure what you want from me. I don't know anything about quantum physics or energy storage or any of the things you do." "No," Dr. Voss agreed, setting her tablet on the counter. "But you know your children, and we need to understand how they think." She pulled up a screen full of complex diagrams that meant nothing to Elena. "Look at this. We've been approaching this problem like engineers, like scientists. We compartmentalized every variable, isolated every coefficient, tried to control every outcome. Your children walked in and saw the whole thing as a playground." Marcus nodded. "They turned competition into collaboration, conflict into symphony. I want to offer them something," Dr. Voss continued. "Not officially, not through any formal academic channel, but I'd like your permission to spend time with Miguel and Sofia, to learn from them while they're still young enough to see the world without the filters we've developed." Elena's protective instincts flared immediately. "They're 8 years old. They need to focus on school, on their regular homework, on being children." "Of course," Dr. Voss said quickly. "I'm not suggesting anything that would interfere with their education. More like enrichment. A few hours on weekends, maybe. Informal exploration of mathematical concepts through play." Marcus set down his cup. "Elena, I want to be completely transparent with you. What your children did on Saturday has the potential to revolutionize energy storage technology. We're not talking about incremental improvement. We're talking about a fundamental breakthrough that could change how the world powers itself." Elena stared at him. "Because Miguel drew circles and Sofia made spirals? Because they saw harmony where we saw discord?" Dr. Voss said. "Because they approached an impossible problem with the assumption that the impossible was just another word for not yet figured out." Elena thought about her children at breakfast that morning, arguing over the last piece of toast, solving the dispute by breaking it in half and sharing. She thought about how they helped each other with homework, Miguel's logical approach, balancing Sofia's creative leaps. She thought about Saturday evening when they'd both been so excited about helping the smart people with their math problem, that they'd recreated the whiteboard drawings on their bedroom wall with crayons. "What exactly are you proposing?" she asked. Dr. Voss exchanged a glance with Marcus. "A mentorship program, not for them, for us. We want to learn how to think like children again before we teach them to think like adults. And," Marcus added, "we want to make sure they're properly supported, academically, financially, personally. You've been carrying a lot on your own, Elena. Let us help." Eleanor felt tears threaten and blinked them back fiercely. Pride warred with pragmatism, independence with the exhausting weight of single motherhood. "I can take care of my children, Mr. Blackstone." "I know you can," he said gently. "You've done an extraordinary job. But Miguel and Sofia have something special, and special gifts require special nurturing." "They're not performing monkeys," Elena said sharply. "No," Dr. Voss agreed. "They're brilliant children who happen to see something brilliant adults missed. I'm not asking to put them on display or turn them into miniature researchers. I'm asking for the chance to learn from their perspective before the world teaches them that some things are impossible." Elena looked out the window at the city below, at the thousands of people rushing to jobs and schools, and lives that followed predictable patterns. She thought about her own predictable pattern: wake, cook, clean, work, home, help with homework, repeat. A good life, a stable life, but limited. Then she thought about Saturday, about the way Miguel had confidently walked to that whiteboard, as if he belonged there, about how Sofia had casually referred to angry numbers, as if mathematical equations had personalities and feelings, about how both of them had assumed without question that they could help. "I'll think about it," she said finally. Marcus nodded. "That's all we ask. But Elena, think quickly. According to Dr. Voss's calculations, we're on the verge of something that could patent as the most significant energy innovation of this century. And right now, the inspiration for that innovation is doing multiplication tables in a public school classroom. That afternoon, Elena left work 2 hours early to pick up Miguel and Sophia from school, a privilege of being indispensable to Marcus Blackstone, she supposed. She found them in the after-school program, Sophia helping a kindergartner with, like you say, a puzzle, while Miguel explained long division to a classmate who'd been struggling. "Mummy!" Sophia ran to her, followed closely by Miguel. "Mrs. Peterson said our drawings are hanging in the hallway now because we helped Danny understand fractions." "Yeah," Miguel added proudly. "We showed him that fractions are just pieces of a whole that want to find each other." Elena hugged them both, breathing in the familiar scent of school, crayons and sanitizer, and the particular mustiness of 8-year-olds who've spent 6 hours learning and playing. "How was your day?" "Good, but I kept thinking about the math problem from Saturday," Sophia said as they walked toward the subway. "Did the smart lady figure it out?" "Dr. Voss," Elena corrected automatically. "And yes, I think she did." Miguel bounced excitedly. "Can we go back and see? Did our drawings help?" Elena stopped walking and knelt down to their level right there on the sidewalk, causing other pedestrians to flow around them like water around stones. "Miguel, Sophia, I need to talk to you about something important." Both children immediately focused on her with that particular intensity that meant serious conversation time. "The people at Mommy's work want to spend more time with you. Not just once, but regularly. They want to learn how you think about math and problems." Sophia tilted her head. "Like teaching?" "More like sharing," Elena said. "But I need to know how you feel about it. You don't have to say yes. You don't owe anyone anything. You're children, and your job is to be children." Miguel considered this seriously. "Would we still go to our real school?" "Of course, this would be extra. On weekends maybe, or after school sometimes." "And we'd still do normal kid stuff?" Sophia asked. "Always. Playing and friends and cartoons and everything else you love." The twins looked at each other in that way twins do, communicating in a language Elena had never fully understood, despite 8 years of observation. "I like helping people," Sophia said finally. Miguel nodded. "And the problems were fun, like puzzles, but bigger." "But," Sophia added with 8-year-old wisdom, "we want to help because we want to, not because we have to." And Miguel continued, "We don't want to become weird kids who only care about math. We like other things too." Elena smiled despite the knot in her stomach. "Those are very good points, and very good boundaries. So can we try it?" Sophia asked her just to see if we like it. "Yeah," Miguel agreed. "And if it's not fun, we can stop." Eleanor looked at her children, her brilliant, innocent, wonderful children, and saw not the solution to Marcus Blackstone's energy storage problem, but 2 kids who had always approached the world with curiosity and kindness. Maybe that was exactly what the world needed more of. "Yes," she said, "we can try it." The next Saturday, Elena arrived at Blackstone Tower not alone, but as part of an unlikely procession. Miguel and Sophia each carried a small backpack filled with colored pencils, sketch pads, and the kind of snacks that sustained 8-year-old thinking. Dr. Voss had prepared what she called a discovery space in one of the smaller conference rooms. Whiteboards at child height, building blocks, art supplies, and mathematical manipulatives that looked more like toys than teaching tools. Marcus was there, but so were others. Dr. James Liu, the young engineer who'd been skeptical the week before. Dr. Sarah Chen from the electrical engineering department. Maria Santos, the head of product development. All of them watching 2 children, with the kind of attention usually reserved for Nobel laureates. "Hi, Dr. Voss." Sophia waved enthusiastically. "We brought you a picture." She pulled out a drawing from her backpack, a colorful spiral that seemed to move even when Elena held it still. It's the dancing numbers from last week, but I made them prettier. Dr. Voss studied the drawing with genuine interest. Sophia, this is beautiful. Can you tell me why you chose these colors? The blue ones are cold math and the red ones are hot math, Sophia explained matter-of-factly. But when they dance together, they make purple, which is magic math. Elena watched Dr. Chen's expression shift from polite interest to fascination. Magic math? Miguel pulled out his own drawing. Sophia means when things work together, they can do stuff they can't do alone, like in music class, when everyone sings different notes, but it sounds like one pretty song. Duh, harmony, Dr. Liu said softly. Yeah, harmony, Miguel beamed. Can we work on the problem again? What followed was unlike any academic exercise Elena had ever witnessed. Dr. Voss presented the twins with a new challenge, not the thermal dynamics problem from the previous week, but a related issue involving energy transfer efficiency. Instead of equations, she showed them a physical model, a series of interconnected tubes through which colored water could flow, representing energy pathways. The water gets stuck here, she explained, pointing to a section where 3 tubes converged. It backs up and doesn't flow smoothly. Sophia immediately crouched down to eye level with the model. It's like when too many people try to go through the door at the same time. Miguel nodded. They need to take turns, or maybe make the door bigger. But in math, Dr. Chen said carefully, we can't just make doors bigger. We have to work with the constraints we're given. Why? Sophia asked with 8-year-old directness. The question hung in the air. Elena watched as 4 brilliant adults struggled to answer something a child had asked with perfect innocence. Because, Dr. Liu said slowly, that's how we've always done it. Miguel frowned. But that doesn't make sense. If something doesn't work, you change it. In science, Dr. Voss explained, there are laws that tell us what's possible and what isn't. Who made those laws? Sophia wanted to know. Another silence. Elena found herself holding her breath. People did, Marcus said from his corner. Very smart people who came before us. Were they smarter than you? Miguel asked. Some of them, yes, but they didn't know everything, Sophia pointed out reasonably, because if they did, you wouldn't have problems to solve. Elena watched her children dismantle centuries of academic assumption with questions so simple they bordered on profound. These adults had spent decades accepting limitations that Miguel and Sophia questioned automatically. You know what? Dr. Voss said, a light sparking in her eyes. You're absolutely right. Let's forget about constraints for a minute. If you could change anything about this model to make the water flow better, what would you do? Sophia immediately grabbed modeling clay from the supplies table. I'd make it more like a river. Rivers have rocks and bends, Miguel added, joining her. But the water finds ways around everything. They spent the next hour rebuilding the entire model, not with engineering precision, but with intuitive flow. Sophia created curves where the original had straight lines. Miguel added what he called rest spots, where the water could gather before moving on. Together, they transformed a rigid system into something organic, dynamic, alive. Dr. Chen ran preliminary tests on their modified model, and her equipment registered a 23% improvement in flow efficiency. 23%, Dr. Voss repeated in wonder, with clay and intuition. Not intuition, Sophia corrected, paying attention. Yeah, Miguel agreed. The water's trying to tell you where it wants to go. You just have to listen. Elena watched Marcus scribble notes furiously, watched the research team exchange glances full of excitement and possibility. But she also watched her children, their faces bright with the joy of play and discovery, not yet aware they were rewriting textbooks. Mummy, Sophia said, tugging on Elena's sleeve, can we eat lunch now? All this thinking made me hungry. And Just like that, Elena's brilliant children were 8 years old again, more interested in sandwiches than scientific breakthroughs. As the adults continued their excited discussions, Miguel and Sofia unpacked PB&J sandwiches and apple slices, chattering about their plans for the playground that afternoon. Elena realized something profound in that moment. Her children weren't prodigies in the traditional sense. They weren't calculating complex equations or memorizing theorems. They were simply approaching the world without the mental limitations that adulthood imposed. They saw problems as puzzles to be solved rather than obstacles to be endured. They assumed cooperation rather than competition. They expected solutions rather than settling for impossible. Maybe that was the real genius, not knowing more but remembering how to see clearly. As the day wound down, Dr. Voss pulled Elena aside. "I've never seen anything like this. They're not just solving problems, they're changing how we think about problems." Marcus joined them. "Elena, I want to make a formal offer, a research partnership. Not just weekend sessions, but something more substantive. Full educational support for Miguel and Sofia, including private tutoring in advanced mathematics and sciences, but always through play and exploration, never traditional academics." Elena felt the offer land like a weight in her chest. "Mr. Blackstone, they're 8 years old. I know, and we want to preserve that. We want them to stay 8 years old for as long as possible, because that 8-year-old perspective is what the world needs. What about their regular education, their friends, their childhood? All protected," Dr. Voss assured her. "We're not talking about creating miniature adults. We're talking about creating an environment where natural curiosity can flourish without being squashed by conventional thinking." Elena looked across. The room where Miguel and Sofia were building something elaborate out of blocks, their heads together, collaborating effortlessly on some grand architectural vision. "I need to talk to them," she said finally. "This affects their whole lives. They should have a say." "Of course," Marcus agreed. "Take all the time you need." That evening, Elena sat with her children at their small kitchen table, the familiar chaos of homework time replaced by a conversation that felt too large for their tiny apartment. "Some very important people want to spend more time with you," she explained. "They want to help you learn about math and science in fun ways, but it would mean changes to our life." "What kind of changes?" Miguel asked. "Maybe different schools. Maybe more time away from your regular friends. Maybe people paying attention to you in ways that might feel strange." Sofia considered this seriously. "Would we still live with you?" "Always," Elena said firmly. "We're a family. That doesn't change." "And would we still get to be kids?" Miguel wanted to know. "That's the most important thing to me," Elena said, "that you always get to be kids." Sofia reached across the table and patted Elena's hand with the kind of gravity that sometimes emerged from her daughter's 8-year-old soul. "Mommy, we know you're scared." Elena blinked back tears. "A little?" "But," Miguel added, "when you helped us learn to ride bikes, you were scared too. But you still let us try. And now we can ride to the park all by ourselves," Sofia said proudly. Elena looked at her children and saw something that took her breath away. She saw confidence without arrogance, curiosity without fear, the kind of trust in the world that she'd lost somewhere along the way, but that they still carried like a gift. "You really want to do this?" she asked. "We want to help," Miguel said simply. "And learn," Sofia added. "Learning is fun when it doesn't feel like work." Elena nodded slowly. "Then we'll try it, together." That night, after Miguel and Sofia were asleep, Elena sat in her small living room and thought about the impossible becoming possible, about variables that danced instead of fought, about the way her children had walked into a room full of brilliant adults, and reminded them what it felt like to see clearly. Tomorrow, she would call Marcus Blackstone and accept his offer. Not because she fully understood what it meant, but because her children had taught her that sometimes the best way to solve a problem was to stop seeing it as a problem at all. Maybe that was the real lesson her children were teaching the world. That impossible was just another word for not yet figured out, and that the most complex solutions often required the simplest perspective. The willingness to see what others had stopped noticing, to ask questions others had stopped asking, to believe that cooperation was always possible, even when all the evidence suggested otherwise. Elena fell asleep that night with her children's laughter echoing in her mind, and for the first time in years, she wasn't worried about tomorrow. Because tomorrow held possibility, and possibility, she was learning, had small hands and bold hearts, and the unshakable belief that every problem was just a puzzle waiting for the right eyes to see it clearly. 3 months had passed since Elena's life transformed from predictable routine into something resembling controlled chaos. What started as weekend visits to Blackstone Tower had evolved into a carefully structured program that consumed Tuesday and Thursday afternoons, alternate Saturdays, and occasional evenings, when Miguel and Sophia's excitement about a particular problem proved too infectious for the adults to ignore. Elena still cleaned and cooked for the executive floors, but now her duties came with something unprecedented: flexibility. Marcus had quietly restructured her schedule so she could attend every session with her children, sitting in the corner with her own notebook, where she documented not the mathematics, but the magic. The moments when her 8-year-olds asked questions that made PhD holders pause and reconsider everything they thought they knew. Sophia had developed what Dr. Voss called pattern intuition, an uncanny ability to visualize how mathematical relationships would behave before running calculations. Miguel showed what Dr. Chen termed systems thinking, always seeing problems as interconnected webs rather than isolated equations. Together, they had sparked what the research team privately called the Martinez effect, a fundamental shift in how they approached complex problems. But success, Elena was learning, came with complications she hadn't anticipated. The first sign of trouble arrived in the form of Dr. Richard Pemberton, head of Advanced Energy Solutions at Blackstone's primary competitor, Quantum Dynamics Corporation. Word of unusual breakthroughs at Blackstone Tower had begun circulating through academic conferences and industry publications, though the specifics remained carefully guarded. Pemberton arrived on a Tuesday afternoon, unannounced, and carrying the kind of aggressive confidence that came with having poached several of Marcus's best researchers in the past. Elena was setting up the conference room for the twins' afternoon session when Marcus and Pemberton entered, their conversation already heated. "Don't be ridiculous, Marcus. Children playing with blocks isn't research. Those children have solved 3 supposedly impossible engineering problems in the last 12 weeks, Marcus replied calmly. Pemberton laughed, a sound like grinding gears. "And I suppose you'll be publishing these miraculous breakthroughs with 8-year-olds as co-authors." Elena felt her protective instincts spike. She'd heard this tone before, dismissive, condescending, the same voice that had told her she'd never amount to more than service work, that immigrants' children should be grateful for whatever opportunities they could find. Marcus noticed her presence. "Richard, I'd like you to meet Elena Martinez, Miguel and Sophia's mother." Pemberton's gaze swept over Elena with the kind of assessment that reduced her to a single dimension. Working class, therefore, irrelevant. "Ah, yes, the cleaning lady with the miracle children. Tell me, Mrs. Martinez, do you really believe your children understand quantum mechanics, or are you simply hoping for a way out of poverty?" The words landed like physical blows. Elena felt her face flush, her hands clench. But before she could respond, Miguel and Sophia burst through the door, home from school and radiating their usual afternoon energy. "Mami!" Sophia ran to her, backpack flying. "Mrs. Rodriguez said our presentation on river patterns was the best she's ever seen. Can we show Dr. Voss the new drawings?" Miguel spotted the stranger. "Hi," he said with 8-year-old directness. "I'm Miguel. Are you here to work on problems with us?" Pemberton stared at the children as if they were exotic specimens. "Actually, children, I was just talking to your mother about whether you really understand what you're doing here." Sophia tilted her head, genuinely puzzled. "What do you mean?" Well, Pemberton crouched to their level with fake sincerity. "Some people think you're just playing games, not doing real math." Miguel looked offended. "We do real math all the time. Last week we helped Dr. Chen figure out why energy gets lost when it changes directions. And I showed Dr. Voss how to make electrons dance in patterns instead of fighting," Sophia added proudly. Pemberton's smile became razor sharp. "Dance? That's very creative. But real science requires understanding complex mathematical principles. Can you tell me what a quantum phase transition is?" Elena watched her children process the challenge, saw the moment they realized this was a test rather than a question. Miguel stepped slightly in front of Sophia, his protective big brother, instincts activated. "We don't know that name," he said carefully. "But if you show us the problem, we might see something about it." "That's exactly my point," Pemberton stood triumphantly. "You're bright children playing with toys, not researchers contributing to scientific advancement." Sophia's eyes filled with tears she tried to hide. Miguel's jaw set in an expression Elena recognized from when other children at school called them names for speaking Spanish at home. "That's enough," Elena said, her voice carrying steel that surprised everyone, including herself. Pemberton turned to her with raised eyebrows. "Excuse me, my children are 8 years old. They don't need to know your fancy words to see what you can't." Elena stepped forward, channeling every moment of exhaustion. Every night she'd held her children while they cried from other people's cruelty. Every time she'd been made to feel invisible. "They've done more real science in 3 months than you've probably done in years of hiding behind your degrees." Marcus watched this exchange with growing intensity. Pemberton's face reddened. "Listen here, Mrs. Martinez. I don't think you understand the gravity of—" "I understand perfectly," Elena interrupted. "You're angry that children succeeded where you failed. That 2 8-year-olds from Queens solved problems you couldn't, and now you're trying to make them feel small because it makes you feel bigger." Sophia wiped her eyes and walked to the whiteboard. Without a word, she began drawing something. Elena had seen her doodle at home, but never understood. A series of interconnected circles, with arrows flowing between them in increasingly complex patterns. "This is how energy changes," she said quietly. "When it can't go straight, it learns to dance around until it finds a new way. Sometimes the dancing makes it stronger." Miguel joined her, adding mathematical notations around her drawings, symbols he'd picked up from watching the engineers work. "The fancy words don't matter. What matters is understanding how things want to move and helping them move better." Pemberton stared at the board. Despite himself, Elena saw recognition dawn in his expression. Dr. Voss arrived then, saw the tension in the room immediately. "Richard, what are you doing here?" "Investigating rumors about Blackstone's supposed breakthrough team," he said, but his voice had lost some of its bluster. Dr. Voss looked at the children's whiteboard work, then at Sophia's tear-stained face, and Miguel's defensive posture. "Did you just make my research assistants cry? I simply pointed out that children playing with crayons hardly constitutes legitimate research." The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Dr. Voss walked to the board, studied the twins' work for a moment, then turned to face Pemberton with an expression Elena had never seen before, pure academic fury. "Richard, do you see this diagram?" Sophia just illustrated spontaneous symmetry, breaking in quantum field theory, using concept she invented herself, because she doesn't know we've been teaching it wrong for 30 years. Miguel just annotated it with a mathematical framework that elegantly solves the phase transition problem that's been plaguing your own research for the past 2 years. Pemberton blinked rapidly. "That's impossible." "Children," Dr. Voss said gently, ignoring him. "Would you like to show me how you'd solve this phase transition question Dr. Pemberton mentioned?" Sophia brightened immediately. "Oh, that's easy. It's like when water becomes ice, right? Dr. Liu showed us that last week." Miguel nodded. "You just have to understand where the energy wants to go when it gets confused." They launched into an explanation that had Pemberton frantically taking notes on his phone while trying to maintain his skeptical expression. They drew phase diagrams that looked like children's art, but functioned like advanced theoretical models. They described quantum states in terms of friendship and cooperation and sharing, using vocabulary that any second grader could understand, but that captured complexities that had eluded traditional academic approaches. When they finished, Pemberton stood in stunned silence. Marcus spoke into the quiet. "Richard, I believe you owe Mrs. Martinez and her children an apology." Pemberton looked from the children to Elena to the whiteboard covered in deceptively simple drawings that had just revolutionized his understanding of quantum mechanics. "I may have misjudged the situation." "You called my children game-playing toys," Elena said evenly. "You suggested I was using them to escape poverty. You made my daughter cry." "Mrs. Martinez, Don't apologize to me," Elena cut him off. "Apologize to them." Pemberton knelt again, but this time his demeanor was entirely different. "Miguel, Sophia, I'm sorry. I was wrong to question your abilities. You've taught me something important today." Sophia studied his face with 8-year-old intensity. "Are you really sorry, or just surprised?" The question hung in the air like a challenge. Pemberton met her gaze. "Both, honestly. But the sorry is bigger than the surprised." Miguel nodded, solemnly. "It's okay. Grown-ups make mistakes too. But next time, maybe ask us to show you instead of telling us we can't." After Pemberton left, walking more slowly than he'd arrived, head bent over his phone as he tried to process what he'd witnessed. Elena found herself alone with Marcus while the twins worked with Dr. Voss in the adjacent lab. "I'm proud of you," Marcus said simply. Elena felt exhaustion replace adrenaline. "I probably just made you an enemy. You stood up for your children. You stood up for yourself. Richard needed to hear exactly what you told him." Elena sank into a chair. "This is what I was afraid of. People thinking we're performing animals, or worse, that we're trying to use Miguel and Sophia for gain." Marcus sat across from her. "Elena, in 3 months, your children have filed 14 provisional patents with this company. When those patents go through, the licensing deals alone will fund their education through graduate school and secure your family's financial future forever." Elena stared at him. 14 patents? For drawing pictures and asking questions? For seeing solutions that the best minds in the industry couldn't find? For approaching insurmountable problems with the assumption that every barrier could become a bridge? Elena looked through the glass wall at her children, watching them explain something to Dr. Voss with animated gestures and bright smiles. They looked so young, so innocent, so blissfully unaware that they were rewriting the fundamental assumptions of multiple scientific disciplines. "Marcus, I need your promise about something. Anything. Promise me that no matter how valuable their insights become, no matter how much money is involved, Miguel and Sophia will never stop being children first." Promise me they'll always have the choice to walk away. Marcus leaned forward, his expression serious. Elena, I promise you this. The moment your children want to stop coming here, the moment this starts feeling like work instead of play, the moment they lose that spark that makes them see what the rest of us can't, that's the day we shut down this entire program. Elena nodded, feeling some of the tension leave her shoulders. Good, because what makes them special isn't what they can solve. It's how they see the world. And I won't let anyone change that. The real challenge came not from outside competitors, but from within the research community itself. 2 weeks after the Pemberton incident, Dr. Martha Henley from Harvard's Department of Theoretical Physics arrived at Blackstone Tower with a proposition that made Elena's stomach churn. We want to study them, Dr. Henley announced during what was supposed to be a routine progress meeting. Not their work, them. How their brains process mathematical relationships differently, what neural pathways allow them to bypass conventional logic structures. Elena felt ice form in her veins. Study them how? fMRI scans during problem solving, sessions, cognitive testing batteries, EEG monitoring. Nothing invasive, I assure you. You want to wire my children to machines and watch their brains work? Elena's voice carried the kind of cold that preceded storms. Dr. Henley, Marcus intervened. I don't think, Marcus, you don't understand the significance of what's happening here, Dr. Henley interrupted. These children represent a potential evolution in human cognitive development. If we can understand how they think differently, we might be able to teach others to approach problems with similar flexibility. Dr. Voss looked uncomfortable. Martha, they're not laboratory subjects. Of course not, but think of the implications. If there's something fundamentally different about how their minds work, shouldn't we try to understand it? For the benefit of science? For the benefit of humanity? Elena stood slowly, every maternal instinct screaming danger. Dr. Henley, let me make something very clear. My children are not science experiments. They're not specimens to be studied, measured, and dissected. Mrs. Martinez, you're being emotional. Damn right I'm being emotional. They're my children. Miguel and Sophia chose that moment to return from their snack break, sensing the tension immediately. Sophia moved instinctively to Elena's side, while Miguel positioned himself with a clear view of all the adults. What's wrong, Mummy? Sophia asked quietly. Elena knelt to their level. Dr. Henley wants to use special machines to take pictures of your brains while you solve problems. Both children looked confused. Miguel spoke first. Why? Because you think differently than other people and she wants to understand how. Sophia frowned. Will it hurt? Dr. Henley? Eleanor looked up expectantly. No pain at all, just observation. Miguel tilted his head in that way that meant he was really thinking. But if you take pictures of our brains thinking, will that change how we think? The question stopped Dr. Henley cold. Even Eleanor blinked. She hadn't considered that possibility. What do you mean, Miguel? Dr. Voss asked gently. Well, when people watch me at school, I get nervous and I can't think as good. And when Sophia knows someone's looking at her drawings while she's making them, they come out different. Sophia nodded vigorously. Yeah, like when Abuela watches me cook, I forget how to crack eggs, even though I've done it 1,000,000 times. Elena felt pride surge through her chest. Her 8-year-olds had just identified a critical flaw in Dr. Henley's research proposal, the observer effect in cognitive studies. Marcus looked at Dr. Henley with raised eyebrows. Well, how do you account for the observer effect when studying children who are already aware they're being observed for their unique thinking? Dr. Henley opened and closed her mouth several times. We could control for that. How? Sophia asked innocently. If we know you're watching our brains think, we can't unknow it. Elena watched Dr. Henley realize she'd been outmaneuvered by an 8-year-old's logic. Perhaps we need to reconsider the methodology. Or, Elena suggested, firmly, perhaps you need to find a different research project. My children's value doesn't come from how their brains work. It comes from what they do with them. After Dr. Henley left, looking considerably less confident than when she'd arrived, Elena found herself in Marcus's office having a conversation she'd been dreading. "How many more will there be?" she asked. Marcus poured 2 cups of coffee, setting one in front of her. "Probably many. What Miguel and Sophia have done, what they continue to do, it's unprecedented. The scientific community is going to want answers. And my children become goldfish in a bowl. Not if I have anything to say about it, but Elena, you should know, there's been talk in the company about going public with their involvement, not for scientific study, for marketing." Elena's cup rattled against the saucer. "Marketing? The board thinks having child prodigies associated with our breakthroughs could be valuable for our public image, especially now that 3 of our biggest competitors have tried to recruit Miguel and Sophia." Elena stared at him. "Recruit them? They're 8 years old. Quantum Dynamics offered you a position as their head of facilities management, with a salary 5 times what I pay you, plus full scholarships for the twins to exclusive private schools if you'd bring them over." Eleanor set down her cup carefully. "You knew about this. It happened yesterday. I wanted to discuss it with you before you heard it from them." Elena laughed, but there was no humor in it. "So now my children are corporate assets to be acquired. Elena, no one sees them that way here, don't they?" Elena stood and walked to the window overlooking the city. "Marcus, 3 months ago, I was invisible. I cleaned your office, made your coffee, watched your children. Now suddenly I'm valuable because my children can solve problems your engineers can't. Do you see the problem with that?" Marcus joined her at the window. "You were never invisible to me, Elena. I knew your name, knew you had children, knew you worked harder than anyone I employed. What I didn't know was how extraordinary your children are. And that's exactly what scares me." Eleanor turned to face him. "Because when this ends, and it will end, because they'll grow up and the world will teach them that some things are impossible. Where does that leave us? Do I go back to being invisible?" Marcus met her gaze steadily. "Elena, regardless of what happens with Miguel and Sophia's involvement here, you have a place in this company that has nothing to do with them. You've earned that yourself." "Have I? Or am I just lucky that my children happen to be useful to you?" The question hung between them, like a bridge Eleanor wasn't sure she wanted to cross. Marcus took a long moment before answering. 3 years ago, you applied for a position in our accounting department. Your application never made it past HR screening because you didn't have a college degree. 6 months ago, you reorganized our entire executive floor filing system in a way that saved us 40 hours of work per week. You did that entirely on your own initiative without being asked because you saw inefficiency and knew how to fix it. Elena blinked in surprise. "You knew about that?" "I know everything that happens on my floors, Elena. You have one of the most brilliant organizational minds I've ever encountered. Your value to this company has nothing to do with your children and everything to do with you." Elena felt tears she'd been holding back threatened to spill. "Then why didn't you promote me? Why didn't you give me more responsibility?" Marcus sighed. "Because I'm guilty of the same blindness as everyone else. I saw your job title instead of your capabilities. That ends now." He walked to his desk and pulled out a folder. "Elena, I'd like to offer you a position as Director of Operations for our research division. It's a substantial promotion with a substantial salary increase, and it has nothing to do with Miguel and Sophia." Elena stared at the folder, afraid to open it. Marcus, I don't have a college degree. I don't have management experience. You have 3 years of experience managing the most complex logistical challenges in this building. You've coordinated schedules for 70 executives, maintained supply chains for 6 different departments, and somehow managed to keep everyone happy while doing it. That's management experience. Elena opened the folder with trembling hands. The salary figure made her dizzy. Think about it, Marcus said. But know this, you're not here because your children are special. You're all here because you're all special. That evening, Elena sat at her kitchen table with the job offer, spread before her while Miguel and Sofia did homework. Normal homework, addition problems, and reading comprehension worksheets that seemed almost quaint after watching them revolutionize energy storage technology. "Mummy," Sofia said, looking up from her workbook, "you seem worried." Elena smiled at her daughter. "A little. Sometimes good things feel scary because they're so different from what we're used to." Miguel finished his math problems and joined the conversation. "Like when we first started going to the big building." "Exactly. Like that? But it turned out to be fun," Sofia said, "even when that mean man tried to make us feel stupid." Elena remembered Pemberton's dismissive sneer, remembered the moment she'd found her voice and defended her children. Yes, it did turn out to be fun. So maybe this scary good thing will be fun too, Miguel concluded with 8-year-old logic. Elena looked at her children, these brilliant, intuitive, wonderful humans who had somehow maintained their innocence despite being thrust into a world of corporate competition and scientific ambition. They still did their homework at the kitchen table. They still argued over who got the last cookie. They still needed tucked in at night. And tomorrow, they would continue helping brilliant adults remember what it felt like to see clearly. Eleanor signed the job offer and sealed it in the envelope. Whatever came next, they would face it together. Because that's what families did. They solved impossible problems by refusing to see them as impossible, by working together, by remembering that the most complex solutions often required the simplest approach: love, trust, and the willingness to see what others had stopped noticing. As she tucked her children into bed that night, Sofia asked, "Mummy, do you think we'll always be special?" Eleanor smoothed her daughter's hair. "You'll always be special to me. But more importantly, you'll always be yourselves. And that's the most special thing of all." Miguel nodded sleepily from his bed. "And we'll always be together." "Always," Elena confirmed, and meant it completely. Outside, New York City glittered with possibility, with problems waiting to be solved, with questions waiting to be asked, by small hands and brilliant minds that still believed in magic, still saw dancing numbers and cooperative systems, and the beautiful truth that impossible was just another word for not yet figured out. Tomorrow would bring new challenges, new people who wanted to study or use or possess her children's gifts. But tonight, they were just a family, safe in their small apartment, dreaming of solutions that had yet to be discovered, and remembering that the best answers often came not from striving but from playing, not from competing but from cooperating, not from fighting the problem but from dancing with it until it revealed its secrets. Elena fell asleep that night with her children's laughter echoing in her mind, and a job offer that would change their lives tucked safely in her purse. Change was coming, had already come, but it felt manageable now because she understood something crucial. Her children's gift wasn't just in how they solved problems, but in how they remained themselves while doing it. And as long as she protected that, their curiosity, their innocence, their willingness to see magic in mathematics, they could navigate whatever challenges lay ahead, because impossible was just another puzzle waiting for the right perspective to unlock it. 2 years had passed since Miguel and Sofia Martinez first walked into Blackstone Tower carrying colored pencils and curiosity. Now 10 years old, they moved through the building with the easy confidence of children who belonged everywhere and nowhere, equally comfortable explaining quantum entanglement to Nobel laureates as they were trading Pokemon cards in the school cafeteria. Elena stood in her new office on the 69th floor, watching through floor-to-ceiling windows as her children worked in the garden she'd designed for the building's rooftop. Not a formal garden, but a space where mathematical principles grew like living things, spiral flower beds that demonstrated Fibonacci sequences, fountain systems that illustrated fluid dynamics, solar panels arranged in patterns that optimized energy collection using theories Miguel and Sophia had sketched on a napkin 6 months ago. The knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Dr. Jennifer Walsh entered, followed by someone Eleanor didn't recognize, a woman in an elegant suit carrying herself with the particular gravity that meant important decisions were about to be made. "Elena," Dr. Walsh began, "I'd like you to meet Dr. Catherine Reeves from the National Science Foundation." Elena's stomach tightened. "Dr. Reeves. Mrs. Martinez, I've heard extraordinary things about your children's contributions here at Blackstone." Dr. Reeves took a seat without being invited. "The foundation is interested in establishing a special research fellowship for gifted children. Miguel and Sophia would be our first participants." Elena remained standing. "What kind of fellowship?" "Full funding for accelerated education, private tutoring in advanced mathematics and physics, eventual placement at MIT or Stanford by age 14. They would be pioneers in a new program designed to nurture exceptional young minds." Elena felt the familiar chill of people talking about her children as if they were objects rather than humans. And what would this mean for their lives? Complete focus on academic development, no distractions, no time wasted on age-inappropriate education. We're talking about giving them the tools to revolutionize science before they're old enough to vote. Dr. Walsh shifted uncomfortably. "Catherine, I'm not sure that's quite what we—" "Dr. Walsh," Elena interrupted quietly, "would you mind giving Dr. Reeves and me some privacy?" After Dr. Walsh left, Elena moved to her desk and picked up a photograph. Miguel and Sophia from last week, grass-stained and grinning, holding a trophy from their school's science fair where they'd presented a project on why flowers know math. "Dr. Reeves, may I ask you something?" "Of course. Do you have children?" "No, I've dedicated my life to advancing scientific research." Elena nodded. "Then let me help you understand something. Miguel and Sophia aren't just brilliant minds that happen to be carried around by child bodies. They're children who happen to be brilliant. There's a difference." Dr. Reeves frowned. "Mrs. Martinez, with respect, you're limiting their potential by clinging to conventional childhood experiences." "Am I? Let me tell you what my children did yesterday evening. After spending 3 hours here working on a project that will likely revolutionize solar energy collection, they went home and built a fort out of couch cushions. Sophia made up a story about a princess who solved problems by making friends with the monsters, while Miguel calculated how many blankets they'd need to cover the fort properly." Elena walked around her desk, moving closer. "They're still children, Dr. Reeves. They argue over whether pizza or hamburgers are better. They cry when they skin their knees. They need hugs when they have nightmares. But they could be so much more. They already are everything they're supposed to be," Eleanor said firmly. "The question isn't what they could become if we push them harder. The question is what they might lose if we forget to let them be 10. Dr. Reeves opened her folder. "Mrs. Martinez, we're offering full financial security, the best education. Money can buy guaranteed placement in prestigious universities." "Dr. Reeves, stop." Elena's voice carried a quiet authority that had developed over 2 years of protecting her children from well-meaning adults who wanted to own their gifts. You want to know why Miguel and Sofia succeed where others fail? It's not because they know more than other children. It's because they still believe that problems are meant to be solved, that cooperation is better than competition, that the world is fundamentally friendly and curious. Eleanor pulled up a video on her computer. Watch this, from last month. The screen showed Miguel and Sofia working with a team of engineers on a water purification system. But they weren't in a lab. They were at a refugee camp in Somalia, where Blackstone had sent them as part of a humanitarian initiative Elena had designed. See how they're not explaining the science to the people there. They're learning from them. Miguel is asking that woman how her grandmother filtered water. Sofia is playing with the children, figuring out which games they share in common. The video showed Miguel and Sofia sitting in the dirt, surrounded by children, drawing diagrams in the sand while explaining how their water system worked in 3 different languages, with mostly hand gestures and pictures. They solved a clean water problem that had stumped our engineers for months, Elena continued. Not by being smarter, not by knowing more advanced mathematics, but by asking simpler questions. Why does the water need to be complicated? What if the solution was something everyone could build and maintain? Dr. Reeves watched in silence as the video showed children and adults working together to construct a filtration system using local materials and elegant principles that required no external power or complex maintenance. The system they designed now provides clean water for 3,000 people, Elena said, and Miguel and Sofia didn't see it as revolutionary science. They saw it as helping their new friends have better water to drink. Elena closed the laptop. That's what you want to destroy, Dr. Reeves. Not their intelligence, but their perspective. You want to teach them to think like academic adults instead of curious children. You want to fill their heads with so much complex knowledge that they forget how to see simple solutions. Dr. Reeves sat back in her chair. Mrs. Martinez, you're being emotional. I'm being protective. There's a difference. Elena moved to the window, looking up at the rooftop where Miguel and Sofia were now lying on their backs, pointing at clouds and probably discussing atmospheric pressure or maybe just imagining shapes. Every week, someone like you comes here wanting to put my children in a box, an advanced box, an expensive box, a prestigious box, but still a box. Elena turned back to face Dr. Reeves. They don't want to be scientific prodigies. They want to help people. The science is just the tool they use. But the potential is being realized perfectly. In the last 2 years, Miguel and Sofia have contributed to 17 patents, solved 12 major engineering problems, and inspired 3 new fields of research. They've also learned to play the violin, mastered long division, and memorized every dinosaur name in existence. Elena sat back down. Dr. Reeves, I'm going to tell you something, and I want you to really listen. What makes my children special isn't that they're smarter than other 10-year-olds. What makes them special is that they still think like 10-year-olds while solving problems that stump 40-year-olds. She pulled out another folder. This is our counteroffer. Blackstone is establishing the Martinez Foundation for Innovative Problem Solving. It's a program that brings children from all backgrounds, not just the gifted ones, together to work on real-world problems using play-based learning. Dr. Reeves scanned the documents. You're turning down a fellowship worth millions to start a playground. I'm turning down a program that would steal my children's childhood to create something that preserves it. Miguel and Sofia will continue their education here on their terms, at their pace, with protection for their right to be children first. Elena stood again. They'll be available for consultation on projects that interest them, but they won't be full-time researchers until they're old enough to choose that path for themselves. And if they choose something else entirely, if Miguel decides he wants to be a teacher or Sofia wants to be an artist, that's their choice to make. Dr. Reeves gathered her materials, clearly frustrated. "Mrs. Martinez, you're making a mistake. Children like this come along once in a generation." "You're right," Elena agreed. "That's exactly why I won't let anyone destroy what makes them special by trying to make them into something they're not ready to be." After Dr. Reeves left, Elena climbed to the rooftop garden. She found Miguel and Sofia exactly where she'd seen them from her window, lying in the grass between the spiral flower beds. "Mommy!" Sofia sat up when she spotted her. "We figured out why cumulus clouds are white but rain clouds are gray." Miguel remained lying down, hands behind his head. "It's about how much water they're carrying and how the light bounces off them. We drew the diagrams, but Dr. Chen said we need to test it in the lab." Elena settled onto the grass between them. "Did you have fun today?" "The water molecules were behaving weird in the morning experiment," Sofia said. "But then we realized they were probably cold, so we warmed them up a little, and they danced much better." Miguel rolled over to face her. "Mummy, Dr. Walsh said someone wanted to send us to a special school." Elena's heart clenched. "Did that worry you?" Sofia nodded. "I like our school. Jenny and Marcus are in my class, and they're teaching me how to French braid. And I'm finally winning at chess during lunch period," Miguel added. "If we went to a different school, I'd have to start over." Elena looked at her children, grass in their hair, marker stains on their clothes, eyes bright with the particular exhaustion that came from a day of thinking hard about interesting problems. They looked exactly like what they were, 10-year-olds who happened to be brilliant. "You don't have to worry about that," she said. "You're staying right here." Sofia grinned. "Good. I was going to suggest we run away to the tree fort we built last month if anyone tried to make us leave." Miguel laughed. "That tree fort doesn't have internet. How would we video call Grandma?" Elena watched them dissolve into giggles over the logistics of running away and felt a deep contentment settle in her chest. This was right. This was exactly where they belonged. 3 months later, Elena stood on a stage in front of 500 educators, scientists, and policymakers, delivering the keynote address at the International Conference on Innovative Learning. Miguel and Sofia sat in the front row, swinging their legs and occasionally whispering to each other. 2.5 years ago, Elena began, my children solved what experts called an impossible problem. Not because they were more intelligent than the adults who'd been working on it for decades, but because they approached it with different assumptions. She clicked to her first slide, a photograph of Miguel and Sofia's original drawings from that weekend at Blackstone Tower. They assumed that problems wanted to be solved. They assumed that conflicting forces could learn to cooperate. They assumed that the simplest explanation was probably the right one. Elena advanced to the next slide, showing the water purification system in Somalia. Since then, they've continued to solve problems in the same way, not by learning more complex mathematics, though they have learned plenty, but by maintaining their fundamental belief that the world is a place where solutions exist, where people can work together, where curiosity is more valuable than credentials. She looked out at the audience, many of whom had probably come hoping to hear about some revolutionary teaching method they could replicate. I'm not here to tell you how to create child prodigies. I'm here to ask you to remember that every child is a natural problem solver until we teach them that some problems are too hard, some questions are too complicated, some solutions are impossible. Elena clicked to a video of the Martinez Foundation's first cohort, 20 children from diverse backgrounds working together on a project to design better playground equipment for children with disabilities. These aren't gifted children in the traditional sense. They're just children who've been given permission to approach problems with creativity, cooperation, and joy. And look what they've accomplished. The video showed 10-year-olds collaborating with wheelchair users, testing prototypes, and iterating their designs, based on feedback from the children who would actually use the equipment. Miguel and Sofia didn't change the world because they were exceptional children. They changed it because they were allowed to remain children while doing exceptional things. Elena advanced to her final slide. A photo from the previous week showing Miguel and Sofia teaching a science class at a local elementary school. Sofia was demonstrating how plants grow in spirals, while Miguel showed younger children how to measure the patterns with rulers and string. The question isn't how to identify and accelerate gifted children. The question is how to preserve the natural curiosity and problem-solving instincts that all children possess. Elena looked directly at Miguel and Sofia, who beamed back at her. My children taught me that impossible is just a word adults use when they've forgotten how to play with problems instead of fighting them. They taught me that the most complex solutions often require the simplest approach: willingness to cooperate, determination to keep trying, and faith that every problem exists because a solution is waiting to be found. She closed her presentation. If we want to solve the impossible problems facing our world, we don't need to create more child prodigies. We need to remember how to think like children ourselves, with wonder, with imagination, and with the absolutely certainty that working together, we can figure anything out. The applause was immediate and sustained. But Elena wasn't looking at the audience. She was looking at Miguel and Sofia, who had stopped swinging their legs and were sitting up straight, pride radiating from every angle of their small bodies. Later, at the reception, dozens of people approached Elena with questions, offers, and proposals. But the conversation that mattered most happened when a little girl, maybe 6 years old, tugged on Sofia's dress. "Are you really a famous scientist?" the girl asked. Sofia knelt to the girl's level. "I'm just a kid who likes solving puzzles. Do you like puzzles?" The girl nodded enthusiastically. "Then you're a scientist too," Miguel said, joining them. "Want to see how we made water dance at our last experiment?" Elena watched her children explain wave theory, using hand gestures and sound effects to a rapidly growing circle of fascinated children. They weren't performing or showing off. They were sharing, the way children naturally shared interesting discoveries with other children. Dr. Marcus Blackstone appeared beside Elena. "How does it feel to have revolutionized education?" Elena smiled, still watching the impromptu science lesson. "We didn't revolutionize education, Marcus. We just refused to let education revolutionize our children. The Martinez Foundation has a waiting list of 5,000 families," he pointed out, "and we'll help as many as we can, but not by turning their children into something they're not, by protecting what they already are." As the evening wound down, Elena found herself on the hotel balcony with Miguel and Sofia, looking out over the city lights. "Mommy," Miguel said thoughtfully, "that lady kept asking how we got so smart." "What did you tell her?" Sofia giggled. "That we're not smarter. We just didn't learn yet that some things are supposed to be hard." Elena hugged them both, these remarkable children who had taught her as much as they'd taught anyone. "And you never have to learn that if you don't want to." Miguel looked up at her seriously. "Mummy, are you proud of us?" Elena felt tears threaten. "Miguel, I'm proud of who you are, not what you've accomplished. I'm proud that you're kind, that you help others, that you still laugh at silly jokes and give the best hugs in the world." And Sofia added with 10-year-old wisdom, that we proved the grown-up word impossible is just another problem waiting to be solved. Elena looked out at the city, thinking about all the impossible things that were becoming possible every day in classrooms and laboratories and boardrooms, where children's perspectives were welcomed rather than dismissed. She thought about the water systems and energy solutions and dozens of other innovations that had emerged from the simple premise that problems wanted to be solved and that cooperation was always possible. But mostly, she thought about Miguel and Sofia, who had somehow managed to change the world without losing themselves in the process, who still fought over who got the window seat on airplanes, who still needed their nightlight to sleep, who still believed with absolute certainty that every problem was just a puzzle in disguise and that every puzzle was meant to be solved together. Tomorrow, they would go home to New York, back to their school and their friends and their regular 10-year-old lives. They would attend the foundation sessions where they helped other children approach problems with curiosity and joy. And they would continue proving every single day that impossible was indeed just another word for not yet figured out. Elena tucked her children into their hotel beds, listening to them chatter about their plans to teach their classmates how to make rainbow patterns with prisms. And as they fell asleep, she realized something profound. They hadn't just solved Marcus Blackstone's impossible equation. They'd solved something much more important. They'd proved that brilliance doesn't require sacrificing childhood, that innovation doesn't require isolation, that the most extraordinary achievements could come from the most ordinary approach. Curiosity, kindness, and the simple belief that working together, any problem could become a possibility. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.